Hey everyone, welcome to our video about the cell and the different parts of the cell. So, what even is a cell? Well, we know from the cell theory that it's the basic structural, functional, and biological unit of all known living things. So, if you break living things down, like what is the smallest thing that could possibly be considered to be living? Well, it's a cell. So there's main types of cells which are prokaryotic, like you see here, and we talked about that. That's an example is like a bacteria, and it is pretty simple. It doesn't have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. And then you also have eukaryotic, which are more complex. So some people remember it by saying pro means no, it doesn't have it, since prokaryotic cells are really simple and they don't have a lot. And eukaryotic is what you are made of. You have cells like animal cells, eukaryotic cells. But basically, even though cells all are the basic unit of structure and function for all living things, and they have a lot of similar organelles and properties in common, they can be different sizes and shapes. Some are more complex and some are less complex. They might have different functions and they might get their energy in different ways. So, what makes up a cell? What's in a cell? Well, they're organelles, which are small structures that make up the cell, and each organelle does a specific function to keep the cell alive. And here are some examples of the organelles. This might be familiar to you from 7th grade, but we're going to talk through these different organelles one by one. First, the cell membrane, and you might have heard it called the plasma membrane. And it is so important that we're actually going to spend next week entirely talking about the cell membrane, and we're going to do a lab with that I think you guys will like. But the cell membrane is basically a protective layer between the inside and the outside of a cell. It's what we call semi-permeable. So it controls what can go in and out of the cell. And it's made of phospholipids. So there's a phospholipid. And if you remember lipids, that's kind of like fats. They're found in all cells. They're so important. They're found in all cells, animals, plants, and prokaryotic cells. Next, we have cytoplasm. It is basically the fluid part, so it's kind of shown in yellow here. It holds the nucleus and any other organelles that are in the cell, and it is found in all types of cells. So you see this word root, cyto. Cyto means cell. So cytoplasm means some sort of like plasma or fluid that's found in all types of cells. Next up, we've got the nucleus. And you might remember that the nucleus controls the cell's activities. It contains DNA, and the DNA can be used to make proteins and kind of direct the function of the cell. It's only found in plant and animal cells. So, prokaryotic cells like bacteria do have genetic material like DNA or RNA, but it's not protected by a nucleus. In the more complex plant and animal eukaryotic cells, you need a nucleus to actually protect the DNA. Next up, we have ribosomes, and ribosomes are where proteins are made. And ribosomes can either be attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum here, or they can be spread throughout the cell. Those little dots represent ribosomes. And ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis. They're where proteins are made. And we know from our macromolecules module that proteins are one of the 4 macromolecules. And you might imagine that every single thing that is alive has proteins and therefore has ribosomes that made them. So proteins are made in ribosomes, and ribosomes can be found in plant, animal, and prokaryotic cells. Next up, we have the mitochondria, shown in orange here. Mitochondria are so important that, again, we're going to spend a whole week talking about them. They're the site of cell respiration. They're where cell respiration takes place. And basically what that does is that converts energy that is in glucose molecules into usable energy, which is called ATP in plants and animals. So mitochondria are actually not found in prokaryotic cells. They are what we call a membrane-bound organelle. And prokaryotic cells are not complex enough to have mitochondria, but they are in plant and animal cells. Next up, we've got the endoplasmic reticulum, sometimes shortened to ER. There is a smooth ER and a rough ER, and they are the cell's transportation system. So think of them kind of like a bus line that runs through a city and moves things around the city. That's kind of like the endoplasmic reticulum. they move materials wherever they need to be throughout the cell. So you can kind of see it's kind of spread out throughout the cell, which helps it move materials. The smooth part here has no ribosomes, and the rough part here does have ribosomes. Now, again, endoplasmic reticulum is a membrane-bound organelle, kind of like the mitochondria was, so it's only going to be found in plant and animal cells. It will not be found in prokaryotic cells. Next, we've got the Golgi apparatus. You can see it there. Sometimes people call it the Golgi body or the Golgi complex. So anytime you see Golgi, just know that we're talking about this organelle that modifies, packages, and distributes materials. It can distribute within the cell or even go outside of the cell. So it's almost like the post office of the cell. You know, the post office here, it can deliver things within Salem, but also outside of Salem. Well, Golgi apparatus can modify, package, and distribute materials in and out to the outside of the cell. They are a membrane-bound organelle, so they are only found in plants and animals, not in prokaryotic cells. Next, we've got the lysosome. Lys kind of means slice or breakdown. It contains digestive enzymes, so special enzymes that speed up the reactions for digesting materials or breaking them down. So lysosomes basically take waste that's in the cell and break it down into its molecules that can be rearranged to make something else or even be pushed out of the cell. They're typically found in animal cells, and sometimes you can find them in a plant cell, but not as often. They are membrane bound, so they are not going to be found in prokaryotic cells. Next up, we've got the vacuole. This is a big fluid-filled sac or kind of like area that just contains a lot of water, waste, and nutrients for the cell. In animal cells, it's usually pretty small, and in plants, it's large, and it's what we would call a large central vacuole, so kind of large and in the middle. And it contains, like I said, water, waste, and nutrients. It is a membrane-bound organelle, so it is not found in prokaryotic cells. Next, we've got centrioles, and they help with cell division. So when the cell goes through mitosis and divides into making two more cells, it has these centrioles that help line up the chromosomes of DNA, genetic material, in the middle. And these are found just in animal cells. Next up, we have cytoskeleton. Okay, you know that your skeleton gives your body shape, and the cytoskeleton helps give cells their shape. And sometimes little molecules can move along the cytoskeleton, and so we can say it helps with some movement in the cell. It's actually in all types of cells, animals, plants, and prokaryotic. So remember cytoplasm, the fluid in the cell, how that word root cyto means cell? Well, you see that word root here again, cyto meaning cell. So cell skeleton, cytoskeleton, it's so important for cells to have their structure and shape that it's in all types of cells. All right, next up we have cell wall. It's a rigid outside structure of the cell. It's on the outside of the cell membrane and it provides support and protection. And it's only found in plant and prokaryotic cells. It's not found in animal cells because animal cells need to be able to move a little bit more and have a little more fluid structure, but cell walls are found in plants and prokaryotic cells and it does support and protect them. Chloroplasts are only found in plant cells. They are pretty complex organelles. In fact, some people think that they might have existed as cells, like simple prokaryotic type cells, on their own before ending up in plant cells, which is kind of cool. We'll talk about that more later. But this is where photosynthesis takes place. And the chloroplast has a bunch of chlorophyll, which enables photosynthesis to take place and basically convert the sun's energy into glucose, which can then be bonded to each other and stored as starch in plants. But those are the green plants, a green part of plants, and they're only found in plant cells. Animals do not have them, and prokaryotic cells do not have chloroplast. Here is just kind of an overall big picture structure and function within all the cells organelles. And this just shows a plant cell and an animal cell. But you can kind of see we've covered some of the most important organelles. There are some other organelles that do exist in plant and animal cells, and even like fungus and simple types of cells that, you know, there are more organelles than what we talked about. But we've covered the main ones, the most important ones, and please let me know if you have any questions about them. Thanks so much for listening.